Welcome back to the Green Beans Go channel. It's your host, me, here for our first NFL video of the 2024-2025 season. We're going to be going through every team in the NFL, all 32 of them, talking about the roster moves they've made this offseason and whether I think they've gotten better or worse. So let's just jump right into it. I'm going to tell you right now, I may make some mistakes, especially as it gets to the second and third string players. I did this pretty quickly. I want this video to be pretty quick, pretty short and sweet, short as you can take 32 teams and talk about them. And so if I miss anything that you think is important or crucial, feel free to add it in the comments. The Cardinals, I've given a green light, which means I think they've gotten better. They've added Marvin Harrison and Zay Jones, which are some weapons at the wide receiver position. They also add Desmond Ridder to back up Kyler Murray, which I don't think moves the needle too much, and maybe even Trey Benson there. See, I've already missed one. So overall, I think the Cardinals improve, but I still don't think they're going to compete for much. The Falcons, I think, also improve in both the short term and the long term. Their moves at quarterback were certainly bizarre, getting Kirk Cousins in the offseason and then drafting Michael Penix Jr. It made a lot of people question, made a lot of people scratch their heads. They add Darnell Mooney and Rondale Moore at receiver, which I think is some speed that they need. I mean, not a ton of big guys on this team at the wide receiver position, so hopefully Kyle Pitts can make up for that as the tight end. But overall, I think they've added some real weapons to go with Kirk Cousins, final few seasons transitioning into Michael Penix Jr. So I like the trajectory of this team. And I do think they have a lot of young weapons that can be good this season. For the Ravens, the biggest move, and maybe even the only move, is to add Derrick Henry, a top 5 running back in the league. We can assume still, obviously, the running back timeline, the lifespan of a running back is a lot shorter than some of these other positions, but I still think him and Lamar are going to be an awfully good combination. It's going to be very dangerous for defenses. I would have liked them to add a different wide receiver to this team. Obviously, Zay Flowers came on at the end of last year, and Rashad Bateman is okay. Nelson Aguilar's been in the league a while, a veteran guy. Mark Andrews hopefully stays healthy this year. Likely's good, but it just feels like they could have added a bigger name maybe at the wide receiver position that would really boost them over their, hump. But I do think this is a team that makes the playoffs and can make a run. The Bills, I mean, just awful. I mean, just truly awful offseason for the Bills, in my opinion. Keon Coleman from the draft coming in from Florida State, I think is a good pick. But Curtis Samuel sitting at your third string wide receiver is just not ideal. You lose Diggs, and I don't think they did well to replace him. They add MVS, Claypool, and Hollins, but these are all kind of journeymen. These are all just kind of guys who can give you a 100-yard game once a season. I don't know. I'm interested to see what they do, but overall, I'm not too impressed with their offseason. I do think they still have playmakers, so they may end up being fine, but on paper, they've gotten worse. Panthers, I think, stay roughly the same. They add Deion Johnson, get him from Pittsburgh, which I think is good, and Xavier Legette, if I'm saying that correctly, is a rookie, I believe, out of South Carolina, possibly. I think the experience with Bryce Young getting an extra, off-season, extra year to prepare will be good. The new head coach they brought in is very quarterback-minded, and so I think he's going to be able to mature Bryce Young quite a bit faster than Frank Reich, who, don't get me started on, I don't think is a good coach by and large in the NFL. They still have Thielen. I think this team, maybe I've convinced myself it's gotten a little better, but still not enough to give it a green dot. I'm keeping it yellow. I think they're about the same. The Bears, one of the biggest off seasons in the NFL, all 32 teams. They upgrade at quarterback, potentially with Caleb Williams. I know a lot of people were high on Fields, but just not a guy who really took this team to the level that they expected. They add DeAndre Swift from the Eagles, Keenan Allen, and Rome Odunze. Again, hopefully I'm saying that right. Washington wide receiver, and they had Gerald Everett over from the Rams. So, I mean, speaking from skill positions, they changed almost every skill position. So if they can gel and if they can mesh, then I think this team has a tremendous upside, tremendous potential. But we'll see how it all plays out on the field. Overall, I think this is a good offseason on paper for the Bears. For the Browns, I've given them a yellow, not a ton of changes. They add Jerry Jeudy over from the Broncos and Jameis Winston to back up Watson. Nothing more needs to be said. I think it's about the same team. For For the Bengals, they lose Joe Mixon, which I don't think is a tremendous loss in terms of looking towards the future. I think he's getting older and he can still produce at a high level, but I was really impressed with what Zach Moss was able to do with the Colts last year when Jonathan Taylor went down. So I am not sleeping on Zach Moss. I think a lot of people are. I think this guy will come in and work hard and fit well in this team. They lose Tyler Boyd, but they get Jermaine Burton in the draft, I believe, from Alabama. They pick up Mike Gesicki. I would have loved for them to go out and get a top 10 tight end if it would have been possible somehow. I think that is the position that's holding this team back from a Super Bowl run. Do I think this team, if they stay healthy, on paper has Super Bowl run potential? Absolutely. But I think that tight end position could be served slightly better than Mike Gesicki. For the Dallas Cowboys, it feels weird to have Ezekiel Elliott highlighted right here. And if you were in a coma for 12 months, you're very confused. Ezekiel Elliott is back with the Cowboys. Came back from the Patriots, signed a 1-year deal. They get rid of Tony Pollard, which is confusing to me. I'm a big Tony Pollard guy. I know last year was not his best season, but I still think he has it. So a little bit bizarre that they let him walk. I'm not in the offices. I'm not in the locker room. Obviously, there's a reason for it. But not a lot of changes with this team. I've given them a yellow. I still think they can perform. For the Broncos, they lose Russell Wilson and Jerry Jeudy. They add Bo Nix and Josh Reynolds. Again, I've given it a red. I think this team gets worse on paper. And I get it. Russell Wilson was not the fit that they thought he would be. Him and Sean Payton did not work out. Something was off. So maybe it's not fair to grade this a red because newness may serve the Broncos well. So we'll see how Bo Nix steps in. It may end up being a yellow or a green. I'm fully willing to admit that I'm wrong. They also get Zach Wilson down here. I did not highlight him at third string, but overall, not a team that's going to compete in the AFC West. Let me explain. No changes that I can see from the Lions, but I think having a cohesive group that stays together for a whole other year when they were already pretty dominant, they lose Josh Reynolds, but outside of that, they've kept this team together. I think a year of cohesion and a year of experience without having to change personnel, I think that's a tremendous benefit. So the Lions and the Packers, I think, are going to compete heavily for the NFC North title. I like the Lions this year. Speaking of the Packers, they had Josh Jacobs, and I think it's the better move. I think it's a better move. I've given them green. Again, they keep a lot of their same wide receivers and tight ends. It's tough. AJ Dillon was splitting carries last year with I'm blanking on his name. The sunglasses, the sombrero. I can see his face. I mean, that's pathetic. He's a big name, and I can't think of it. Wow. Aaron Jones. Sorry. That's pathetic. I apologize. Aaron Jones, but Josh Jacobs comes in. If he's the lead back with A.J. Dillon maybe being a third down back or goal line back, I do think this has a lot of potential. I think this sets up nicely. Josh Jacobs needed a change of pace, a change of scenery, so I do think this is overall good for the Packers. Houston. What do we need to say? If Joe Mixon has another year in him, 2 years at the level he's played his career, you add Mixon and Diggs to go along with Collins and Dell, who we saw excel last year, John Mechie, Noah Brown, Robert Woods as backups. I don't know how this team doesn't take the AFC South. I mean, on paper, this is one of the most talented and youngest and dynamic teams that we may have in the NFL. That may be a bold statement. I may be gassing a little bit too much, glazing a bit too firmly. I like this team a lot on paper, and I think they did good to make some moves this offseason. The Colts, also in the Texans division, they get Anthony Richardson back, hopefully to stay healthy for a whole year. They add Adonai Mitchell from Texas in the draft. Michael Pittman signs a deal in the offseason. They lose Zach Moss. I think they've added a little more depth. I don't know about this tight end position. I'm not sold on any of those guys, but I do think adding Joe Flacco to help mentor Richardson is a great pick. So I do think the Colts have gotten better this offseason. Jaguars add Mac Jones, kind of a bizarre add. Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas from the Bills, and from the draft, they lose Calvin Ridley and they lose Zay Jones. So it's kind of tricky. I could argue that a red label would have been fair, saying they got worse, but I think Gabe Davis, Brian Thomas serve a similar purpose as did Ridley and Zay Jones. So I do think this team will be about the same on paper and on the field as it was last year. You don't let the Super Bowl defending champions get better at the position they lacked. Can we maybe not do that, guys? Can we maybe set up some parameters so that we're not giving them Marquise Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy, the position that we heard about as their weakness all season? The wide receivers, they can't do it. They still managed to win a Super Bowl with what receivers they had, and now they've added 2 names. I'm sick of it. We need an injury. I mean, I don't wish for an injury, but we need an injury on this team, because I'm sick of watching them dominate. They got better on paper. What are we doing? The Chargers add Gus Edwards at the expense of Austin Eckler, J.K. Dobbins, Chark, Ladd McConkey, and Will Dissly. I don't know. Maybe Harbor or Jim Harbaugh can come in and do miraculous things, but I think this team's gotten worse. Their one issue last year was receivers when Keenan Allen and Mike Williams went down. And what did they do? They added Ladd McConkey? What? I mean, ridiculous. They got worse, in my opinion. Rams, I think, stay about the same. Get Garoppolo, who's serving a suspension, and Blake Corum, Boston Scott to back up Kyron Williams, but they keep their teams the same. You can make the argument, well, you said the Lions got better from keeping the same team. Why don't the Rams? I don't know. I think Stafford's still getting old. Puka Nacua, obviously, it's still in his prime right now as a second-year player. Cooper Kupp's getting older at the wide receiver position. So I think it's just a little bit different of a dynamic, but still I think this team will compete with the 49ers in some capacity for the West. The Dolphins add Odell Beckham Jr. and Jonnu Smith. I know people are kind of back and forth on Odell Beckham. I think, again, he's aged a bit. He didn't do a ton for the Rams. He didn't do a ton for the Ravens. So I don't know if he's going to come in and do a ton for the Dolphins. Obviously, Hill is going to get a lot of attention, which may open up lanes and such in the defense for Odell, but I don't think this team improves too much on paper. The Vikings, interestingly enough, have Sam Darnold listed as the starter. Not many people believe that in the media. They think that JJ is the guy, but as of now, it looks like Sam Darnold's going to start the year. We'll see how that turns out. They add Aaron Jones in division rivalry added there. Sorry, I couldn't think of his name a little bit ago. I think it's the same. I mean, I would rather have Kirk Cousins and Alexander Mattison than Sam Darnold and Aaron Jones, personally. But obviously, when you have Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and TJ Hawkinson, you can sacrifice some other positions. So I think they stay about the same, and they should win 8 games. Patriots, Jacoby Brissett, and interestingly enough, once again, Drake May is serving the backup position right now. Antonio Gibson comes over from the Commanders, KJ Osborne, Jalen Polk in the draft, and Austin Hooper. They have a new coach this year. We'll see what happens. I'm not a huge believer in this team right now. For the Saints, one of the most interesting and kind of disappointing teams, in my opinion. Michael Thomas was not the same player last year that he's been in his career. They had St. Brown and they add Cedric Wilson. But again, I don't know. It doesn't seem to jump off the page at me right now. The Giants lose Saquon Barkley. They add Drew Lock. They add Singletary. They get Malik Neighbors in the draft. They get Allen Robinson and Isaiah McKenzie. And I could make an argument that this could be a green just because Saquon Barkley was always a risk to be injured. Singletary, I think, still has an edge to him. But the main thing is their depth at receiver was suffering last year. You never knew who was going to play for the Giants, and when they did play, it wasn't pretty. So I think adding Neighbors in the draft, going along with Hyatt, who will be in his second year, Slayton has been somewhat reliable, but getting Allen Robinson and Isaiah McKenzie with some veteran leadership and potentially guys to serve some roles, I think there is an argument that could be made for this being green, but we'll keep him at yellow because Daniel Jones, I still don't trust him. The Jets are green, and maybe that's unfair. And yes, I've highlighted Aaron Rodgers. He didn't play last year, so I'm considering him a new player for this team. They also get Tyrod Taylor, Braylon Allen from Wisconsin. He'll be a rookie. Mike Williams and Malachi Corley as well. And I think if Mike Williams can stay healthy, which has not been the case for like the last half decade, then he will be a great addition to this team. I think there's a lot of weapons. There's a lot of potential on this team. Jordan Travis being able to sit there behind Aaron Rodgers and learn, I think that's really good for the potential and the future of this team. So truly, I am high on the Jets this year. For the Raiders, Gardner Minshew comes over from the Colts, Alexander Mattison from the Vikings. They draft Brock Bowers. If Aiden Connell's the guy, then sure, they lose Josh Jacobs, which I think is a big hit, considering that Zamir White is quite a step down from him. They keep their wide receiver personnel pretty much the same. They do add Michael Gallup. Forgive me, I did not highlight this. I'm just now noticing this. And maybe even Jalen Guyton, who I think was with the Chargers previously. So if they could have fixed their quarterback position in some capacity, I was really pushing for them to go after Justin Fields. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see Gardner Minshew start a little bit this year. The Eagles add Saquon Barkley in one of the bigger moves this offseason. They also get Kenny Pickett when the Steelers decide to do whatever they did. Get Will Shipley from Clemson, I believe, Paris Campbell from the Colts, and CJ Uzama, I cannot remember where he came from. Again, I think at the ceiling, this team could be really solid, but I'm scared that we just see things break down. I'm scared we see injuries. Obviously, the tush push with Saquon Barkley is going to be impressive, but there was an edge that DeAndre Swift had with this team that Saquon Barkley is just a different style of running back, and he hasn't had a complete season except for maybe 2022 where he played all 16 games. Outside of that, he struggled to stay healthy. So we'll see. Again, the ceiling's high for this team, but I'm worried we'll see them at the floor. The Steelers, some of the bigger moves of this offseason as well, adding not only Russell Wilson, but Justin Fields in a bizarre turn of events that I still cannot wrap my mind around. It's giving Atlanta Falcons, but worse. Van Jefferson, Roman Wilson, and Scotty Miller. They lose Deontay Johnson. I don't know if this is the supporting cast that Russell Wilson, left Denver for, if that makes sense. You go from Denver, Colorado to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and you don't really upgrade in terms of team. I mean, Van Jefferson is your number 2 receiver. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I don't know. 49ers are giving the Detroit Lions treatment. Not any changes from their starters. They had Josh Dobbs, Ricky Pearsall, and Logan Thomas. Glass bones Logan Thomas, who probably will somehow get injured without playing a game. I could probably give him green just because of the cohesion and the team chemistry. But as a Seahawks fan, I refuse to acknowledge them in any capacity being good. Speaking of the Seahawks, not a ton of changes as well. They add Sam Howell and Laviska Shenault. Also, Kenny McIntosh. I don't know about Geno, if I'm going to speak truly. I think he served his purpose, but I was shocked that Seattle did not pursue a quarterback a little bit heavier in the draft, especially with a loaded draft. Maybe they believe in Sam Howell, still a young guy, and I think maybe we see Sam Howell start this year a little bit. Overall, I think they have weapons. I think Seattle could win 8 to 10 games. Titans get better. And I think we're sleeping a little bit on Mason Rudolph. This is a guy who came in for Pittsburgh at the end of the year and won some games and looked darn good doing it. They had Tony Pollard, who I am high on. Obviously, it's at the expense of Derrick Henry, which is not great, but I think Tony Pollard can serve a purpose. Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, and Tyler Boyd, I think, are a tremendous 3-pairing trio of wide receivers. The Titans might actually win some games. I may have been capping on the Titans. Watch out. The Colts might be last in the South. That's crazy. We'll see. Tampa Bay stays pretty much the same. Get Bucky Irving from Oregon and Sterling Shepard from the Giants. Not a ton to talk about there. And lastly, we have the Commanders, who I do think get better with the green dot. Jaden Daniels and Marcus Mariota come in. Austin Eckler, if he can stay healthy, I think he is one of the more versatile and unique backs in the league. Zacchaeus from the Eagles comes over. Luke McCaffrey from Rice, I believe, and Zach Ertz. So not a team that I think will compete with the Eagles and the Cowboys long-term in the NFC East, but a team that I think is setting itself up well for the future. I realize that's not as short as I want it to be. We're just under 20 minutes. Thank you guys for coming by. We'll see you soon, and I love you all. And we'll see you soon, and I love you. And I love you, and I'll see you soon.